many people go through what is called the dark night of the soul, when you achieve a certain level of stability, where you have enough money in your bank, you bought enough assets, you have your cars, you have your villas, you have everything that society told you should have to be happy and fulfilled, and suddenly you realize that it doesn't actually quite cut it, and you think, right, what do I do now? Because I still feel that emptiness inside.
Hey leaders, welcome back. This is Ledge. I'm really excited to welcome J.H. Tepley to the show today. Jay is an author, entrepreneur, international speaker, and spiritual mentor. She describes herself as a lifelong geek and a research aficionado, and she offers world-class spiritual training for male entrepreneurs to help them create dream meaningful reality, turbocharge their success, and leave an epic legacy that's in alignment with their soul's path. And of course, today I'm going to ask all kinds of things about that. Her New Era Superhero program has shown many men the road to personal power, fulfillment, and my favorite, increased revenue along the way. And she spent the last 20 years working in this space. So, Jay, I want to talk to you all about your work. You write books, you do lightsaber training, which I think is super amazing because we have all kinds of Star Wars nerds around here. So why don't you just maybe tell me a little bit of this story? I mean, you cover all kinds of media, you do all kinds of things, and then spiritual coaching, which I think is super interesting. So just give me a little bit about it.
Sure. So this is something I've been doing for the past 20 years, just over. And I'm really passionate about it because I think right now, in our changing times, this is the best kind of investment that you can possibly think of in yourself. Because in the economy where everything gets devalued really quickly, including money, including assets, you are your main asset. So if you invest in yourself, if you make yourself as valuable and as bulletproof as you possibly can, then no matter what happens, you could have the upper hand. And especially for men, I think it's super important today.
So I'm a male entrepreneur. So what's special about male entrepreneurs? In fact, you read that there's too many of us and there's not enough opportunity for everybody else, and yet I know, and I read prolifically about, CEO loneliness and, all types of sort of existential stuff that happens in that role. What is it that's different about males that you like to work with?
I think in our society, there is not enough support for men and for male entrepreneurs in particular. There are all sorts of women support groups, trainings, you name it. And there is not much done, in my opinion, to support men on their journey. I'll explain what I mean. So with females in general, they have a much stronger intuition factor in them. And so it works to their advantage, especially where there are no certain rules. So right now, everything is changing so quickly, and obviously it's a lot easier for someone who can navigate intuitively to find the right steps. Whereas the way the male mind works in general is that men need an action plan, a defined set of steps, something that they could follow, a blueprint of sorts. And because in ancient societies, that was given to men. And I think that was partially why ancient societies thrived in many respects compared to our society today, is because there was a rite of passage that helped young boys become men. And for a male mind, it's super important to know, where is that threshold? When do I stop being a child and start being a man? And because that was taken away, it has resulted, sadly, in many, as you probably know, there is a term, man-child. Someone who has a grown-up body, but their mind is still stuck in that juvenile stage. And I'm not talking about it in a derogative kind of way, because I think many of those guys would absolutely love the opportunity to level up. It's just in our society, there is not enough done to help them out. And because of that, many of those men, young men, suffer from depression, because depression hits in many cases when you don't see the right way forward. You feel that you are stuck in a reality that just doesn't feel right, and it's suffocating. And I don't know if you've seen the statistics, but male depression and male suicides are double that of female.
Okay, interesting. So, and I've watched some of your videos, and you kind of talk about the interesting relationship of depression to, illness. And I thought that was particularly, it was relevant to me. I understood what you were saying. I'd love if you would repeat a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, there is a common paradigm that many people believe in, namely that depression is some sort of a chemical disbalance in your body, like a physical illness of sorts. And sometimes you have to just accept it and live with it. So it can be a chronic physical illness. And I don't want to upset anyone's feelings and beliefs here, but in my experience and in my observation, the chemical disbalance follows the mental disbalance. And so when something starts going wrong in the mind, it then starts going wrong in the body. And the mental state always precedes the physical state. And actually, even with modern established science, they have proven time after time that whatever happens in the mind affects the body. And so the majority, if not all, our illnesses are psychosomatic. So that means that we can organize our mind in a way that it would keep us healthy. And that includes depression. And as I just explained, with men specifically, I've noticed that depression strikes when that person feels that they're not where they should be in their life. So they're living the life perhaps according to someone else's expectations, perhaps following someone else's blueprint, but not their own. And because, your inner core, your soul, whatever you want to call it, knows that your time here is limited. It wants to express itself. It wants to become the fullest expression of you, not a copy of someone else. And so when subconsciously you feel that you're wasting your time, you're being a copy of someone else, you're not living your life on your terms. So this is when depression happens. So it happens in the mind. It happens because your mind is unhappy with the course of action that you're currently taking. And then obviously the body follows. So it's not something that you're stuck with. It's not something chronic. You can't get out of it if you just start working on your mind. And this is part of the reason why I'm so passionate about my work, because it gives guys a clear blueprint of what is not working, what are, I call them the errors of the mind, like in the computer. If you know how to read those error codes, then you know how to fix them. So I give them a clear step-by-step blueprint of what to do, how to get there. And yeah, I've seen many people's lives actually being saved through that process and changed.
Right. And as a person who thinks about, maybe not as much as I should, garbage in, garbage out, nutrition, proper physical activity, things of that nature, I do find the feedback loop from body to mind is also, relevant there. Do you experience that as a loop, or almost, like sort of you can get on at any point and give that feedback, or do you think about it primarily as mind into body the way you described it?
Of course, they feed into each other, and of course, they're one unit that interacts on all levels. But at the end of the day, the mind leads and the body follows. Because I think you can think of loads of people who were really healthy physically in terms of they exercised, they ate right, they were doing all the healthy stuff, severely depressed, nonetheless. And yeah, and I read some statistics of people who, like, you could never tell from the way they looked or the way they behaved that they were depressed up until they chose to take their lives. So it's true that the body obviously contributes to the equation, but at the end of the day, your mind is king.
Right, right. Yeah, sort of that's where everything lives, so to speak. That's home. So maybe, for people that want a more, we have a very tactical audience, it's like, what exactly would this be if I were to do it? Maybe some takeaways, or what does that blueprint look like when I sort of put pen to paper metaphorically?
Sure. Well, it's pretty straightforward. It does include work, but it's simple in its structure, and it consists of two parts. So the first part is about rehab. And the reason for that is because for a person being stuck in the rut, in a life that doesn't suit them, in a life that is traumatic and depressing, it actually traumatizes the mind. And so if you want to reclaim your strength as a man, if you want to influence the world greatly, if you want to help propel your business forward, you can't just do it from the point where you are at with those mental wounds. And this is where many people get it wrong, because they promise results straight away without explaining that, yes, you can get those, but you first need to undo the damage that you had exposed yourself to over the years. So you can see it as training for strength. So for example, someone says, oh, I want to be an Olympic athlete, or I just want to be really strong and win competitions.
But I want to sit on the couch and eat chips. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if that doesn't happen, then they have to revisit their priorities. But let's say someone is ready and willing, and they come to you and you see that they have lots of injuries. So you can't really say, okay, so just do these push-ups, sit-ups and live those ways, because you see it's not going to go well. They have to address the injuries first. And with mental training, it's very similar. So we first see where the mind is not working, where are the trauma areas, and release those and fix those. And then from that point, part two is about stepping into your personal power as a human being, because we are not functioning the way we are meant to. And this is the problem that most people struggle with, and this is why most people find their lives unsatisfying. You can ask top level CEOs, entrepreneurs, billionaires, and they will say, I actually feel like there is something important missing in my life, and I can't put my finger on it, and it drives me nuts. So many people live, someone described the state of quiet desperation. And the reason for that is because the physical reality, although it's great, can only offer you so much. We are both physical and spiritual beings. So not in a fluffy new agey way, I stay well clear of those, but we just have to admit the facts. We may like them or dislike them, but it is what it is. So we have the physical body, but we also have this energy, spiritual aspect to us. And if we don't address it in the right way, we will always feel like we are living below our potential, like there is something missing. And living your purpose actually implies that you tap into that potential and you integrate it. Because in really simple terms, the way we're supposed to function as both the physical and the spiritual beings is like having your right hand and your left hand and using them both without thinking, oh, I shouldn't believe in my right hand or in my left hand because everyone just uses one. You know what I mean? So we are given both, we're supposed to be using both, and many people go through what is called the dark night of the soul, when you achieve a certain level of stability, where you have enough money in your bank, you bought enough assets, you have your cars, you have your villas, you have everything that society told you should have to be happy and fulfilled, and suddenly you realize that it doesn't actually quite cut it, and you think, right, what do I do now? Because I still feel that emptiness inside. So I help people who come to that point and they've achieved on the material plane, and so they've proven to the world and themselves that they are achievers, that they can focus, that they have the discipline to create results, but they have come to the point where they think, okay, what's next? What do I do now? So this is where my training can really help.
Right. Now, I have to ask you, like, what you're describing feels a lot like almost, I would hear people say, the missing piece, right? Like that's the human condition. And the experience of a lot of successful women would be very similar. I mean, I've had those conversations myself for sure. So you feel like that missing piece just because of sort of the epigenetics, I guess, of society and history, is just more pronounced for the male entrepreneur?
Well, there is something that very, very few people know about. So apart from physically men and women, there is something as the feminine and the masculine principle, as principles in the universe, and they have a very different dynamic. So our society is now in a lot of pain, partially because we don't follow that natural universal principles, and they're just like forces in the universe. So they're neither good nor bad, they just exist, like gravity, like electromagnetic and electric forces. So the feminine and the masculine principle, the dynamic is that the masculine principle creates something new, and the feminine principle takes what is created and makes it better, beautifies it, nurtures it. And right now in our society, there is a lot of, propaganda going on to try and brainwash people into not following their natural principle. And if someone does that, it unfortunately results in them not living up to their true potential, because your true power as a person, male or female, lies in being aligned with your natural polarity as a life dynamic. And so in the universe, in society, in business, it's likewise. So the role of man is to go first and to create, and for women to support what is created and restructure it and beautify it in some way. So if someone follows that natural dynamic, they will thrive. Again, male or female, it's just the dynamic is different. And so right now, our society really forces men, from what I've noticed, to step away from their natural polarity and follow the feminine polarity that actually brings them down. And the feminine polarity is everything that tells you that you should go with the flow, accept what is, surrender to what is. And if you've done any kind of self-development, you've probably heard lots of that. So that is going with the flow, surrendering, is the feminine polarity. The male polarity is to move forward, to create, to explore. And right now, I haven't really heard anyone else talking about it. And this is why we have so many really lost men, I would say, especially young men, who didn't have an example of how to really step into their personal power, and it hurts. And that what brings them down. And you know what? You're never separate from your business. So business is an extension of you. So if you're not in a good place, your business is not in a good place, because you can't serve your customers, you can't talk to your team from the empowered, true perspective of that true you, of a leader. You know what I mean? And so this is why I do what I do. I haven't seen many people doing this kind of work. And I think in our day of age, men really need empowerment and a clear blueprint of how to get into their true power, how to serve the world greatly, how to leave that epic legacy coming from that point of inner stability, inner power, and inner strength. And so this is why I do what I do, and this is why I focus on men, because I think women are really well catered for already.
Mm. Which would be completely the opposite of what you would often sort of hear and read, and that we've made dramatic efforts to think about diversity and inclusion and sort of all these things. Is the undercurrent of that the sort of the male being left behind? Because you do read some of that stuff in the kind of popular press as well. But how does it fit into the whole zeitgeist? Like, do you not want to look at those sort of popular, I don't know, not existential, but popular tropes maybe? Is it running contrarian to that?
Well, because of my training, I am personally resistant to any kind of propaganda. And I teach my students to be likewise, because if you want to stay sane, you have to be able to think for yourself and make your own decisions. And about the propaganda, I can say that the easiest thing and the easiest way to keep people subdued is to shame them and guilt trip them. Because if you frighten someone to keep them obedient, they can rebel. But if you shame someone and make them feel unworthy, they would not. And so guilt, over the course of whole human history, guilt is the most powerful tool of mental control. And yes, there are certain forces that like to use that, and it's good to be aware of that, and it's good to stay well clear of that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've read enough psychology books in selling and business to know that there are certain triggers of influence and persuasion and all the things that I think I like to think of it as you can use it for good or for evil, and just know the power that's in your hand with that type of interaction, because there are good ways to use that leverage and there are kind of shady ways to do it. And I think it's all upon us as leaders in business to kind of not use the shady ways to do it. And generally, I would say you probably would get called a bad leader if you were perceived to do it that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would just add quickly that as a leader, you have a double or triple responsibility to think for yourself, because if you're a leader, you're not just responsible for you personally, but you're responsible for your team, for your community, for people who follow your example. And so if you allow yourself to drift, then other people who are on the fence, who don't know what to think, may follow that to their own detriment. So for a leader, nourishing his community is one of the most important duties. And I think your personal responsibility increases a lot. There is a lot of power and a lot of obviously enjoyment in being a leader and leading others, but being a person who can see better than others and further than others is what absolutely needed to fulfill that role. So then later on, you have no regrets.
Jay, thank you. This was super interesting. I definitely heard a lot of my own journey in the stories and the frameworks, and my brain is background processing many different little pieces and snippets. So I really appreciate your time coming out. It was a lot of fun.